Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my July reading wrap up. So I am really happy about this month's wrap up because sorry, my lip stain is being a butt. There we go. I feel like I'm crawling my way out of the enormous reading slump I was in last month. And so the first part of this month, I was still kind of struggling with it, but I thankfully had these wonderful rereads that I did for my patrons and stuff like that. And I also just had some really great books right here at the end of the month. So I'm very excited and looking forward into August. There's a lot of fun things happening. We're kicking it off right away. Today that you're watching this should be the first day of the Romance Takeover Readathon. So I'm ready to just sprint my way out of this reading slump. So it's fantastic. But let's go ahead and dive in. In case you don't know, if you're new, if this is your first monthly wrap up for me, I don't actually go over every single book that I've read. I have weekly reading wrap ups that I do. There's a playlist. I'll link it up here, which will have every book that I've read from the beginning of 2022 until today, I talk about in those wrap-ups. When I do my monthly wrap-ups, I talk about my stats. The nerds, stats are for the nerds, and then my top 5 reads of the month. I don't talk about my least favorite. I don't dwell on those things in here, but if you want to know the nitty-gritty, if you want to get into it, we talk about those on my weekly wrap-ups. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the stats. So in the month of August, or July, I'll scoot over so I can put the graphics up here. In the month of July, I read 46 books. This was 14,447 pages and an average of 481 pages per day, which is still pretty good. We're getting back up to what I like to read daily, so liking that. The format of these books was 18 ebooks, 14 audiobooks, 7 advanced reader copies, and 19 physical books. And then the ratings for these books were, I had 6 6-stars. Now keep in mind, 5 of those 6 stars were rereads, so I only had 1 new 6-star to add this month, which we'll talk about in my favorites. There was 7 5-stars, 5 4.5 stars, 15 4 stars, 6 3.5 stars, 6 3 stars, and 1 lonely 2.5 star. So it was pretty good overall. The subgenres of these books were 15 contemporary, 10 fantasy, 5 historical, 3 paranormal, 8 dark romance, 2 erotic, 1 sci-fi, 1 dystopian, and 1 other. And then, yeah, so it was pretty great. And we're going to dive right into my favorites because, like I said, I like to keep it rolling. And a lot of these favorites were all in the last week, so it's kind of crazy, like I said. So the first one, though, was near the beginning of the month. And that book was The Butcher's Wife by Sam Crescent. This was a surprise to me. This book just popped up on NetGalley. It was going to be coming out like 3 days from the day that it was available. And sometimes indie authors will do that with their books. They'll put them on NetGalley. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they only use ARC teams. But this one was up there. And this was a novella length. And it was the perfect little treat. Okay, this book is not perfectly written. It's a quick story because it's a novella. But it just really worked for me. So this is about this woman who she was horribly abused when she was kidnapped because she was engaged to the head of the mafia's son. And so she was kidnapped to use as like collateral. And when she was returned, she was horribly like scarred. She hadn't been sexually assaulted, but she had been abused in so many other ways. It was horrible. And the fucker that she's engaged to doesn't want her now because she's ugly to him. But he's a little pissant anyway and wouldn't have been a good husband to her no matter what. So she gets kind of ignored and pushed off to the side. And then we have our hero in this case who has been a part of this mafia and kind of the right-hand guy to the mafia boss for the last 20 years. And as a reward, the boss lets him choose any of the single young women available to wed, and he immediately knows who he wants to choose. He chooses our heroine, and we begin this book at their wedding day, and he makes it very clear to her that he's going to treat her like a queen. He's going to teach her to protect herself so she never has to be vulnerable again the way that she was when she was kidnapped, and he's just going to make her his woman. And I loved it. It was only like 120 pages. It was nice and spicy. It was fun, and it worked for me, okay? It worked. Then we have another mafia book, and this one I was highly anticipating, and that is Dreams of the Deadly by Adelaide Forrest. This is the first book in a duet that is, I think, Dreams of the Massacred or Massacred Dreams. I'm not sure. But this is about Calix, sorry, my brain had to search for his name, and Thalia. And this is another case of an arranged marriage. Now, they were arranged to be married from the time that Thalia is like 5 or 6, or she might be, I can't remember if she's like 6, 7, or 8 or whatever age, but Calix, he's like 13 when this gets done, and so for the next couple years he's keeping an eye on his betrothed. Like, he's friendly to her, he brings her treats, he is kind to her, he's looking out for her, and when he sees that her father is abusing her, he puts a stop to it because he's like, this is my future bride, why are you mistreating her? That is, like, no, not going to happen. But then, tragically, the father does something and makes something known that gets Calix banished for 16 years, and Thalia has now no hope of ever getting away from her father. So 16 years later, she is in a different betrothal to this horrible pig of a man, and she is literally about to marry him when Calix makes himself known, and he has been building power and amassing relationships and friendships and connections so that he could take back his intended bride. And so in grand mafia spectacle, he busts up her wedding and takes her away, but she feels very abandoned by him that he left her. And you know, that's a little bit irrational because we saw what happened to him. Like, we know he was literally dragged away from her, but she was a child, and all she's known is her father and her horrible stepmother and the abuse that she's went through. Our heroine, she's also colorblind and she's left-handed, and her father mistreats her for both of those things quite often. So yeah, there's a lot of crazy sexiness in this book. There is a list of triggers right at the beginning. Adelaide Forrest gives them to you. You know, there's cases of like a little bit of dubious consent. There definitely is stalking on the part of Calix. He's been watching Thalia for a few years. There is breeding kink in this. There is a bit of somnophilia, just a little bit. There is some violence and gore as well. So lots of triggers in this, but I gotta tell you, Calix is probably my favorite hero I've read by Adelaide Forrest. She does write some heroes that are very unhinged, and Calix, he didn't feel unhinged. He's going to do what he has to do to protect Thalia, and he also isn't going to let Thalia get away with like disrespecting him. But all in all, like, he's very patient and devoted to her in a way that some of Adelaide Forrest's other heroes aren't. Like, I actually had quite a few questions, people asking me, because Calix, he actually like was protected by Raphael, who Raphael has a trilogy, or like it's called like, the series is like Beauty and Lies. And Raphael, in my opinion, is horrendous to his heroine, and not in the sexy, dark way. Like, I hated him. I never finished the series, and I never will. This was not that to me. Like, there are still some of those uncomfortable things that Adelaide Forrest does, but it was not the same as Raphael at all. Like, I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. And it's the first part of Duet. The second part, I think, is coming in September, but this didn't have like a huge cliffhanger at all. They're just now like, you know, going to take over together. But this first part didn't have like a huge cliffhanger. So it's up to you if you want to wait till both parts are out, but you could read this and you won't be left like, oh, what's going to happen, you know? All right, then I had my new 6-star, which I've talked about quite a bit in the last couple videos I've done, so I'll try to kind of like push through this kind of quickly. But I read my first H.D. Carlton, and it was Does It Hurt? And this book is so hard to explain. but it has a bit of a thriller element. There's some romantic suspense happening in here, but our heroine is an identity thief because she's on the run, and so she sleeps with men and steals their information. She is in Australia when this happens. She has a one-night stand with a man named Enzo, who's a marine biologist. He works with sharks. He has his own business where he does that, and she steals his identity, and then they run into each other again, and he kind of pretends that he's forgiven her, tricks her into coming onto his boat with him. They have an interesting encounter, which I don't want to spoil, but it was bonkers. And then they end up shipwrecked together on this island with a lighthouse and a crazy lighthouse keeper. And now these two people who have become like enemies, you know, they are now forced to rely on each other to try to survive their time on this lighthouse. And there are some secrets happening in this lighthouse, and it's crazy, but I really liked this. And it was a 6-star book for me. It's a 5 on the spice scale. It has some very interesting things. There are some kinks in here that I just, there's breath play, which I love breath play. There is, you know, your good old, you got spanking. There's some degradation in here. There is saying sweet words to you in Italian because I can't say them in English happening. And yeah, watching how they go from enemies to lovers and how their hate fucking turns into more, like, I love that. Mixed with the romantic suspense element happening, this book really worked for me. I liked it a lot. Then I have a book that definitely doesn't fit in with this other run that I'm doing. I'm actually putting Irish Rogue by Lydia Michaels on here. So I read an advanced audio copy of this. This book has actually been out for a few years. The McCullough Mountain series got a re-release, and they got audiobooks recently. And this one was amazing. It actually had some sound effects. And like, it was one narrator, but he did really good voices, and I'm kind of sad that the rest of the series didn't have this as well. Like, legit, I've been listening to the other books in this, and I wish they all had sound effects like this one did. But this one is actually a virgin heroine who is a Christian. She's a faithful woman, and she has had a crush on the town like man whore for a long time, and it's time in her life for her to start like dating. She wants to find a husband. She wants a family. And all of a sudden, Kelly McCullough is interested in her. There's a lot more that goes into that than what I'm just explaining. And I talk really in depth about this in my week 30 wrap up. Like, I talked about it for like 10 minutes, which I'm not going to do here. But I just really loved how Ashlyn's faith was shown. Like, it isn't in your face, but she also sticks by her standards and like her reason for waiting and like what she's looking for. And it doesn't mean she's a prude. It doesn't mean she doesn't want to have sexy time with her man, but for her, she has standards and she has needs that need to be met before she's going to give her body to someone, because she's like, it's important to me not just to like give this away. And what I love watching is the way that Kelly goes from a little bit incredulous about it. He never like teases her the way that some other people in town do, but the way he goes from kind of incredulous to being like, you know, what has the empty sex ever done for me? Has that ever made me feel fulfilled? No. It's made me feel used, and it's given me a reputation I don't like. So maybe Ashlyn is like onto something. And they actually get married kind of like early-ish into this book, and their journey towards like being married and then their time in their beginning marriage, like, I just really loved it because it's issues that I've seen in my real friends' lives, and also questions and, you know, philosophies and beliefs that I myself share. So this one was a very personal 5-star for me. I've already had a couple people comment on my week 30 wrap up where they're like, no, I feel the same way. That sounds really interesting to me. And again, I highly recommend the audiobook if what I've said sounds good to you. And let me be clear, like, this was still a 3 on the spice scale for me. Her books don't go like overly raunchy in the McCullough chain, but like, once these two are together, like, there's still like our rogue, our playboy, he teaches his lady some stuff, okay? They say, you know, the reformed rakes make the best husbands, and that's what's happening in this, okay? That's literally what's happening in this. So I had a great time with it. And then the last one I want to mention is Embers by Claire Kent. This one isn't out yet, but it will be out on the 8th of August. This is book 3 in the Kindled series. It's continuing the books during the apocalypse. And this one is actually a girl named Rachel and her dead boyfriend's dad. Because this is an apocalypse situation near the beginning of it, Rachel and her boyfriend Derek, they are 17, they end up being kind of taken in by Cal's estranged father, Derek's estranged father, Cal. And not long into this, Derek actually succumbs to the lung disease that is happening because of the apocalypse, and as this asteroid hit the earth and made this cloud of toxic stuff or whatever. And so now for the next few years, Rachel and Cal are trapped together in this one room cabin, needing to survive and rely on each other. And Cal is very much fighting his feelings. This is in the POV of Rachel, so that happens in all of Claire Kent's books, is we're in the POV of a heroine, and we usually have this stoic hero who thinks he's not good enough for the heroine, or he's very much fighting his feelings. And so it takes a lot for Rachel to convince him that they should make each other feel good. Literally nobody knows but us. There's no one here. Let's do it. So I just really love it, and I love how these books end up working out, because you kind of you really could read these in any order that you want. There's Last Light, which is technically a standalone. It's not in the Kindled series, but they all work as standalones. And then there's Haven and Princess, and then this one, Embers, and then Hero will be coming out in December. So all of these books are shortish, they're between 200 and 250 pages, and for being an apocalypse story, they're pretty low. The danger is there because of, the people who are left are scary, dangerous people, but the relationships are awesome. I just love it so much. So highly recommend. An honorable mention as well, because I only let myself pick 5 favorites, but I also just read Zephyr, which came out the day that I'm recording this, but I got to read an arc. This is book 4 in the Immortal Coven series, and I've had pretty much every one of these books in one of my wrap-ups, so I just have to throw it up that I really liked this as well. And Amara just released the name of the final book, which is going to be called Necrosis. And that's going to be about Eva, who is the Death Witch, and I'm so excited. I just love this sexy, twisted, dark fantasy paranormal series. It's just fantastic. So there you go, everybody. That is my July wrap-up. Those are my favorite books. Let me know which of these books you're interested in. Tell me what your favorite read in July was. Thank you so much to my patrons and channel members who support me and help me to do this full time. If you're interested in supporting the Book Refuge, please check out my links down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!